The Unsettling Encounter. It all started on a seemingly ordinary evening. My name is Anna, and I had just returned home from a long day at work. I lived with my husband Tobias and our 6-year-old son Lucas in a quaint little house on the outskirts of town. That night, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner while Tobias was reading a book in the living room. Lucas was playing with his toys on the floor nearby. As I was chopping vegetables, I heard Tobias call out to me. "Anna, can you come here for a second?" he said. His voice sounded off, but I dismissed it, thinking he was just tired. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the living room. There, standing by the bookshelf, was Tobias. But something was wrong. His eyes were vacant, almost hollow, and his expression was eerily blank. "Tobias," I called out, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Before I could say anything else, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw Tobias sitting on the couch, looking at me with confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice normal and full of concern. I whipped my head back to where the other Tobias had been standing, but he was gone. My heart raced, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Did you see that?" I stammered, pointing to the spot where the doppelganger had stood. Tobias shook his head, his brow furrowed in worry. "See what? Anna, are you okay?" he asked, standing up and walking over to me. I could only nod, too shaken to speak. The following days were filled with unease. I kept seeing glimpses of the doppelganger out of the corner of my eye, always just out of reach. It was driving me insane. Tobias was starting to worry about my mental state, and I couldn't blame him. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, I was putting Lucas to bed when he looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Mommy, why do you keep staring at me from the hallway?" he asked. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's another you," he whispered. "She stands in the hallway and watches me. She looks just like you, but her eyes are scary." I hugged him tightly, trying to reassure him, but inside I was terrified. Things escalated quickly after that. The doppelganger became bolder, appearing more frequently and in more disturbing ways. One evening, Tobias came home late from work. I was in the kitchen again, cleaning up after dinner. Suddenly, I heard Tobias's voice calling me from the bedroom. "Anna, come here," he said, his tone urgent. I felt a sense of dread as I walked towards the bedroom. When I opened the door, I saw Tobias standing there, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light. He smiled at me, a twisted, eerie grin. "Anna, come here," he repeated, his voice a low growl. I slammed the door shut and ran back to the living room, where Tobias was just walking through the front door. "What's wrong?" he asked, seeing the panic on my face. "We need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. "Now." We packed a few essentials and drove to a nearby motel. I explained everything to Tobias, and he finally believed me. We decided to stay away from the house for a few days, hoping the doppelganger would leave us alone. But it didn't. The first night at the motel, I woke up to find Tobias standing at the foot of the bed, staring at me. His eyes were glowing, just like before. "Anna, come here," he whispered. I screamed, waking the real Tobias, who was sleeping beside me. The doppelganger vanished, but the fear remained. We couldn't escape it, no matter where we went. It was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the end, we had no choice but to return home. We hoped that by confronting the doppelganger, we could somehow get rid of it. But as we walked through the front door, I knew deep down that it would never let us go. To this day, I still see it, watching me from the corners of our house. Tobias and I have grown distant, the constant fear taking its toll on our relationship. Lucas refuses to sleep in his room, too scared of the doppelganger that haunts our lives. We live in perpetual terror, knowing that we can never escape its grasp. The doppelganger is always there, a sinister reflection of our worst fears, waiting to claim us. Doppelganger in the mirror. It all began a few months ago when my best friend Alina and I decided to move in together. We found a quaint little house in the suburbs that seemed perfect. We were both excited to start this new chapter of our lives, unaware of the sinister events that awaited us. The first week went smoothly as we unpacked and settled in. It was on the 8th night that things started to get eerie. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, when I glanced at the mirror and saw Alina standing behind me. She was smiling, but there was something off about her reflection. Her eyes seemed darker, almost hollow. I turned around to talk to her, but no one was there. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just tired from all the moving and organizing. The following day, Alina mentioned something strange. She said she saw me standing in the hallway last night, just staring at her room. I told her about my mirror incident, and we both laughed it off, attributing it to stress and fatigue. However, the incidents didn't stop. One evening, I came home from work and found Alina sitting on the couch, watching TV. I greeted her, but she didn't respond. She just kept staring at the screen with that unsettling, hollow-eyed look. I felt a chill run down my spine. I walked past her to my room, and that's when I heard the front door open. Alina walked in, looking cheerful and carrying groceries. "Hey, you won't believe the sale I found at the store," she exclaimed. I froze. I turned back to the living room, but the doppelganger was gone. I mustered up the courage to tell Alina what happened, and she looked just as frightened as I felt. We decided to do some research about the house, but there was nothing particularly notable or sinister in its history. No tragic events, no former residents who might haunt it. It was just a normal house. That only made the situation more unsettling. As days turned into weeks, the doppelgangers became more aggressive. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I groggily opened my eyes and saw Alina standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes glowing a sinister red. She was whispering something unintelligible, but the tone was filled with malice. I screamed, and the figure vanished. The real Alina came running into my room, panicked and confused. We both decided to sleep in the same room for safety, but even then, we weren't safe. I woke up one night to find Alina standing by the window, looking out into the darkness. I called her name, but she didn't respond. I got out of bed and approached her, but as I reached out to touch her, she turned around, and her face twisted into a grotesque smile. "You're not Alina," I whispered, and just like that, she disappeared. The real Alina was still asleep in bed, unaware of what had just happened. I shook her awake and told her everything. We were both terrified, but we didn't know what to do. We considered moving out, but we feared the doppelgangers might follow us. One particularly horrifying incident happened while I was in the shower. I heard someone humming a familiar tune. Thinking it was Alina, I called out to her. The humming stopped, and I heard the bathroom door creak open. Through the shower curtain, I saw a shadowy figure standing there. "Elena!" I called out again, but there was no response. The figure slowly moved closer, and I could see those same hollow eyes through the curtain. I screamed, and the figure vanished, leaving me trembling in fear. Elena and I decided to record everything in hopes of finding a solution. We set up cameras around the house, hoping to catch the doppelgangers on tape. The footage we captured was chilling. In one video, I was seen walking into the kitchen and grabbing a knife, my eyes vacant and lifeless. In another, Elena was seen standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me as I slept. But the most disturbing footage was of both of us standing in the hallway, our doppelgangers mimicking our every move with twisted smiles. We showed the footage to a few close friends, hoping they might have some answers or advice. Most of them were skeptical, thinking it was a prank or some kind of elaborate hoax. But a couple of friends believed us and suggested seeking help from a paranormal investigator. Desperate, we contacted one, but the investigator's visit didn't bring any solutions. The doppelgangers refused to show themselves while he was there, and he left us with more questions than answers. We were at our wits' end. The doppelgangers were driving us to the brink of insanity. One night, we decided to confront them directly. Armed with a camera and a flashlight, we ventured into the darkest corners of the house, calling out to the doppelgangers. For a while, nothing happened. But then, the air grew cold, and we heard footsteps echoing through the hallway. We turned around and saw our doppelgangers standing there, their eyes glowing red with malice. They began to laugh, a chilling sound that echoed through the house. "Leave us alone!" Elena screamed, but the doppelgangers only laughed harder. They started to move closer, their forms flickering like a bad signal. In a desperate attempt to escape, we ran out of the house and drove away, not stopping until we reached a friend's place. We explained everything, and they offered to let us stay with them for a while. For the first time in months, we felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was short-lived. The doppelgangers followed us. They appeared in mirrors, in the corners of rooms, and even in our dreams. We couldn't escape them, no matter how far we ran. Now, we live in constant fear, knowing that our doppelgangers are always watching, always waiting. We don't know what they want or why they chose us, but one thing is certain: we are never truly alone. The doppelgangers have become a part of our lives, a sinister shadow that we can never escape. And so, we continue to live in fear, haunted by our own twisted reflections, knowing that one day they might take our place for good. The doppelganger in my home. It started about a year ago, when I moved into a small, cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. The place had a certain charm, an old-world feel that I found irresistible. Everything seemed perfect, but it didn't take long for strange things to begin. The first incident occurred on a rainy night. I was sitting in the living room, engrossed in a book, when I heard a soft shuffling noise coming from the hallway. I glanced up and saw a figure that looked exactly like me standing at the end of the corridor. My heart pounded in my chest. I blinked, and the figure was gone. I chalked it up to my imagination, a trick of the dim light and shadows. But the occurrences became more frequent. I'd see my doppelganger in the reflection of windows, standing just behind me. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of it in mirrors, mimicking my every move. It was always fleeting, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on it. One evening, I invited my friend Jens over. We were having a casual conversation in the kitchen when his face suddenly turned pale. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I just saw you outside looking in through the window," he said, his voice trembling. My blood ran cold. We rushed to the window, but there was no one there. Jens was visibly shaken, and I could tell he believed what he saw. That was the moment I realized I wasn't imagining things. My doppelganger was real, and others could see it too. The activity escalated. One night, I woke up to the sound of my own voice calling my name. I got out of bed and followed the sound to the living room, where I found my doppelganger standing by the fireplace. Its eyes were empty, and it was smiling a twisted, malevolent smile. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. It didn't respond. Instead, it just stood there, staring at me with those hollow eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. When I blinked, it was gone. I decided to do some research. I found stories of others who had encountered their doppelgangers, and the accounts were eerily similar to mine. Some people believed that seeing your doppelganger was a bad omen, a sign of impending doom. I didn't want to believe it, but the fear gnawed at me. One particularly terrifying night, I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth. When I looked up at the mirror, my doppelganger was standing behind me, its face twisted in a grotesque grin. I spun around, but there was no one there. I turned back to the mirror, and it was still there, grinning at me. I screamed and ran out of the bathroom, my heart racing. I called Jens and told him everything. He was skeptical at first, but agreed to stay with me for a few days. The first night he stayed over, he saw it too. We were sitting in the living room when he suddenly went pale. "It's right behind you," he whispered. I turned slowly and saw my doppelganger standing in the doorway. Its eyes were locked onto mine, filled with malice. We both froze, too terrified to move. After what felt like an eternity, it vanished. Jens and I tried to find a way to get rid of the doppelganger. We tried everything from sage smudging to calling in a priest, but nothing worked. The sightings continued, and they were becoming more frequent and more disturbing. One night, I woke up to find my doppelganger standing at the foot of my bed. It leaned over me, its face inches from mine, and whispered, "You can't escape me." I screamed and scrambled out of bed, but it was gone. I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything. The fear was consuming me. I decided to move out, hoping that leaving the house would rid me of the doppelganger. Jens helped me pack up my things, and I left the house behind. For a while, things were better. I moved into a new apartment, and the sightings stopped. I started to feel like myself again, began to sleep soundly, and the constant fear began to fade. But last week, it happened again. I was walking through the park near my new place when I saw someone sitting on a bench. As I got closer, I realized it was my doppelganger. It looked up at me and smiled that same twisted, malevolent smile. My heart stopped. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, trembling. I knew then that I couldn't escape it. No matter where I went, it would follow me. Now I live in constant fear. Every reflection, every shadow, every dark corner feels like a potential sighting. I know it's only a matter of time before it appears again. And when it does, I'm not sure what will happen. All I know is that my doppelganger is out there, watching, waiting, and I can never escape it. My doppelganger stole my life. It started when I was coming home from work late one evening. As I approached my apartment building, I saw someone standing at my door. It took a moment to process that I was looking at myself. The figure turned, gave me a blank stare, and then vanished into thin air. I shook it off, thinking I was just overtired and seeing things. But the sightings became more frequent. I'd see my doppelganger in reflective surfaces, watching me with a cold, emotionless expression. It seemed to know my routines, appearing in places I was about to go. The most unsettling thing was how it mimicked my every move perfectly, like a shadow that had gained its own consciousness. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, I saw it standing in the doorway behind me. Its eyes were empty, its face a blank mask. I spun around, but no one was there. I was left staring at an empty hallway, heart pounding in my chest. Things escalated when my friends and family started seeing it too. My best friend Lila called me in a panic one evening. "I just saw you at the grocery store," she said, her voice shaking. "But you were wearing different clothes and didn't acknowledge me. It was so weird." I reassured her it wasn't me, trying to make sense of it all. The doppelganger wasn't just content with haunting me, it was making its presence known to those around me. The worst incident happened on a stormy night. I was home alone, the power flickering from the intense wind and rain outside. I was sitting in the living room when I heard a knock at the door. Hesitant, I approached and looked through the peephole. There it was, standing on my doorstep, soaked from the rain, staring directly at me. I backed away slowly, terrified. Suddenly, the door burst open, and I felt a cold, unnatural wind sweep through the apartment. The lights flickered, and the doppelganger was standing in my living room, its eyes boring into mine. "What do you want?" I screamed. It didn't respond. Instead, it slowly raised a hand and pointed at me, then disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared. The room fell silent, but the tension was unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant fear and paranoia were driving me insane. I decided to confront it, to find out what it wanted from me. I started researching everything I could about doppelgangers, trying to find a way to banish it for good. One night, equipped with sage, salt, and a collection of protective charms, I decided to perform a ritual I had read about. I drew a circle of salt around me and lit the sage, chanting the incantations I had memorized. As I finished, the air grew cold, and my breath became visible. The doppelganger appeared across the circle, its face twisted in an eerie smile. I held my ground, continuing the chant, but the doppelganger stepped over the salt line effortlessly, breaking the circle. It reached out, and before I could react, it touched my forehead. I felt a jolt of icy electricity course through my body, and everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, the room dimly lit by the flickering candles. The doppelganger was gone, but something felt off. I stood up, my body aching, and walked to the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't quite right. There was a coldness in my eyes, an unfamiliar smirk on my lips. It took me a moment to realize the horrifying truth. The doppelganger had switched places with me. I was now trapped in a twisted version of my own body, while it was out there, living my life. Days turned into weeks, and I watched helplessly as the doppelganger ruined my relationships, sabotaged my career, and isolated me from the world. It reveled in the chaos it created, all while I could do nothing but watch. I'm writing this as a warning. If you ever see your doppelganger, don't ignore it. Don't let it get close. And whatever you do, don't try to confront it alone. The price is far too high. You've heard the horrors. Subscribe if you want to keep the spirits on your side. Until next time, pleasant dreams.